get kicked off here. Bert, can you make that just a shade larger for me? Great, that's plenty good. All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started here. I'll put my video on just temporarily. Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the monthly meeting of the City of Des Moines Zoning Board of Adjustment. This board has the power under Iowa law and the zoning ordinance of the City of Des Moines to hear and make decisions on requests for variances and exceptions from the regulations in the zoning ordinance, to review conditional use requests, and to consider appeals from any decision of city staff in the administration of the zoning ordinance. Members of this board are citizens of the City of Des Moines and have been appointed to the board by the City Council. The board members are volunteers and receive no compensation for their public service. My name is Mel Pins. I'm the board chairman, and just for these opening remarks, in order to welcome everybody, I've got my video feed up here, but then I'm going to take that video off. But just wanted to welcome everybody to our process here today. Our board members participating today are Nathan Blake, Cindy Smith, Marlis Jones, Justin Gross, and myself. So that's 5 of our 7 members. I'll also give some introductions of city staff that will assist us and that you may hear from today. That staff includes Judy Parks Cruz, legal counsel for the Board of Adjustment, Michael Ludwig, the planning administrator, Bert Drost, city planner, Sue Ann Donovan, zoning enforcement officer, Dolores Brazinio, meeting moderator, Eric Lundy, city planner, Jason Van Essen, city planner, and Catherine Dostart, city planner. I'm going to go through the meeting procedure here. Our meeting procedure is exactly the same as it would be if we were all here in person at a live hearing. We do have a few things with how you'll be asked to be recognized during your time for participation in the hearing, and I'll go over that. Otherwise, this is the same process. While this is a public open meeting, the meeting is being recorded. This is a quasi-judicial legal hearing. The board members have each received a copy of the agenda and the staff recommendations. The board is required to base its decision on each item upon the criteria established by law for the type of relief sought by the applicant. The law applicable to each case has been identified in the written staff report. If the facts, as determined by this board, demonstrates that the criteria established by law for granting the relief has been satisfied, then the board must grant the requested relief. Otherwise, the board must deny the relief. Each item will be announced in the order that it appears on the agenda. Items listed on the consent portion, which is the first portion of the agenda, are not planned to be individually discussed. They will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendations in the staff report, unless the appellant or a member of this audience does not agree to the conditions recommended by staff, or if an individual board member requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda so that a full discussion on the matter can occur. And I will come back to that as we visit our consent agenda to help everyone through that. For our agenda, after an item is announced, staff will first give a brief overview of the appeal and present any written comments received prior to the hearing. The applicant or their representative will then be allowed up to 10 minutes to present their appeal. We will then move to the public comment portion of the hearing. Anyone wanting to speak of, opposition to, or to speak in neutrality of the appeal will be allowed up to 5 minutes each to provide their comments. This will be their one and only opportunity to address the board, and the board will take time to make sure that we give plenty of time to ask for and get everybody recognized during their time to participate. When it is your time to speak, if you wish to speak on the item at hand, please click the raise hand icon on the participants panel if you are participating via Zoom on your computer, or press *9 if you are participating over the phone. This will allow the meeting moderator to know to call on you. And again, when the time comes, we'll give those instructions again. When it is your turn, the meeting moderator will unmute your microphone and acknowledge that it is your turn. If you have any documents that you need to use in your presentation today, if you have not already, you will need to email those documents for the record to planning@dmgov.org. That's planning@dmgov.org. planning@dmgov.org. Once all concerned citizens have spoken, the board will then ask any additional questions of city staff. And lastly, the applicant will be given 3 more minutes for a rebuttal or closing comments if they so choose. Okay, let's see. The board will then, let's see, where did I leave off? Okay. All speakers are requested to begin their presentation by giving both their name and address. That address can be your place of business if you're here in a professional capacity as a business owner, attorney, a consultant, an architect, etc. If you're here as an individual resident, please give your address of residence. All speakers are requested to remain courteous and to focus their comments only upon those facts that demonstrate whether or not the criteria established by law has been satisfied. Speakers are also asked to ensure that they are respectful of time considerations, and if necessary, we will limit further comments by a speaker if they exceed their time limitation. After speakers present their concerns, the board will close any further public comment on the item, and the board will immediately deliberate the request, and we will make a decision here today during the hearing. Please note that it takes at least 4 affirmative votes for any zoning appeal to gain approval. We normally have, we have 7 members on this board. We have very good attendance. Sometimes we do have members that have no other choice but have to be absent. So today we have 2 absent members. That leaves 5 members of the board to deliberate today. As I stated, it takes at least 4 affirmative votes for any appeal to be approved. So if you're on our agenda today for approval of your item, again, you're going to have to convince 4 out of the 5 of us to get your appeal granted. So for some reason, someone feels that that might not give them fair enough shake in the hearing process, and they'd like to have more members present, you can ask for your agenda item to be continued to the next regular hearing. However, we can never guarantee that we will have a full 7 members for the board or 6. So we'll cover that again as we move through the hearing. So again, it takes 4 affirmative votes, and we've got 5 members here today. If your appeal is approved at today's hearing, we ask that you wait until next week to contact the city's Permit and Development Center if you would need to obtain any necessary building permits. This allows the board's decision to be documented in the form of a decision and order. Any appeal that is approved by the board must be implemented, constructed, or otherwise utilized within 2 years of the date of the decision by this board. Otherwise, the approval shall expire. The decisions of this board can only be appealed in the Polk County District Court. If you believe you've been harmed by an error made by this board, your only remedy is to seek relief through the district court within 30 days of the filing of the board's decision and order. If you believe the zoning regulations applied by this board are wrong, you may petition the city council to change those regulations for future considerations. All material written or otherwise used today as part of any presentation will become a permanent part of the record and will not be returned. You may contact staff after the hearing if you need a copy of any materials that someone presented today. And again, we remind you, you'll need to email any documents or photos that you want to present today to planning@dmgov.org. So we ask that you keep your microphone on mute other than when addressing the board to limit distractions during the hearing. I also ask that you refrain from using the chat or Q&A question and answer function as part of the Zoom meeting. That will be construed as what's called an ex parte communication, which is communication outside of the formal hearing, and we will not be monitoring the Q&A function or doing any chat responses. Okay, let's see. So I believe that is my opening comments. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at the agenda for any changes we may have to the agenda. So Bert, I'll turn that over to you.
Sure. Mr. Members of the board, Bert Drost, planner for the city of Des Moines. We do have 5 items that have requested continuance. The first one is item number 4 at 1606 Center Street. Verizon has requested a continuance to the September 23rd Board of Adjustment meeting. And then on items 5, 6, 7, and 8, Casey's has requested a continuance of those 4 items to the October 28th Board of Adjustment meeting. And this is the first time that any of these 5 items have requested a continuance, so staff is supportive of these requests.
Okay, all right. Before we can consider a continuance as a change in the agenda, Board of Adjustment members have any questions in regard to that request for continuance? Okay, seeing none. Would there be a motion to continue items 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 to the next regularly scheduled meeting?
Well, items 5, 6, 7, and 8 would be continued to October 28th.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Item 4 would be to September 23.
Okay, so would there be a motion to consider to move item 4 for continuance to the next regularly scheduled meeting, and items 5 through 8 for basically 60-day continuance, which would be our October meeting?
Mr. Chair, this is Cindy Smith, and I would so move.
This is Marlis. I would second.
Okay, so we've got a motion by Cindy and a second by Marlis. Bert, will we do roll call?
Yes, I'll be doing that. So I'll be reading through the name. Blake.
Is that me?
Yes.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Gross.
Aye.
And Pins.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Yes, thank you, Bert. So those items will be continued to future meetings. If you were here to speak and share comments on items 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, they have been continued. You can check with staff for when those will be scheduled if you would like to give comments at a later date. Okay, this will then move us to what's called our consent portion of the agenda. Do we have any changes there, Bert? We just have 2 items on that.
Correct. Items 1 and 2. Item 1 is at 2106 Echo Valley Drive. Staff has recommended approval, and I believe the applicant agrees with the conditions. We received no opposition to that one, so I believe that could be approved on the consent. And then item number 2 is a request at 1940 and 1960 East Army Post Road for a conditional use. And we received no written objections to that one. So that one could also be approved on the consent agenda.
Okay. All right. What I'm going to do is ask our audience here, those that are attending the hearing, is there anybody in the audience who would be opposed to granting conditional use approvals for Casey's Marketing at 2106 Echo Valley Drive? That's item 1. Or for the Hindu Cultural and Educational Center at 1940 to 1960 East Army Post Road, which is item 2. If there is any member of the audience that wishes to object to granting conditional use approvals on items 1 or 2, we will then do a full hearing for those items here today. If you would object to granting the conditional use approvals, if you're participating by Zoom, raise your hand on the participant panel, use the little hand icon. If you're participating by phone, hit *9, and staff will look for those requests, and then we will acknowledge you. So is there anybody here in opposition to granting approvals for item 1 or 2? Hit *9 on your phone or raise hand on Zoom. Staff, do we see anybody?
I do not see any hands.
Okay, from the members of the board, is there anybody here who would have any questions on those items or be in opposition to considering these? If there are no questions, would there be a motion to grant conditional use approvals for item 1 and 2?
I would move to grant that for items 1 and 2.
Motion by Marlis, is there a second?
Mr. Chair, this is Justin Gross. Yes, I second that.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion by Marlis and a second by Justin. All those that would be in favor, say aye as we take roll call.
Cindy
Or
Smith,
nay.
Aye.
Marlis Jones,
Aye.
Justin Gross,
Aye.
Nathan Blake,
Aye.
Mel Pin.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, all right, so with that motion passing, if you were the appellant for items 1 or 2, about this time next week, staff will have a written decision and order noting the approval and the conditions for that. They will provide a copy of that to you for your record. So if anybody was interested in item 1 or 2 today, those have been reviewed, approved, and we will now move on to our regular consent agenda. And we'll begin that with item 3. That's a zoning variance and a zoning exception request at 4975 Hubble Avenue. I will turn this over to our city staff to give a brief review of the request.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this is Eric Lundy, Senior City Planner. Item 3 is located at 4975 Hubble. They had a addition to their facility there, which was a repair shop, to which by the code then drove the need to remove the existing pole sign that was on the site previously and still stands today. It's 22.5 feet tall, and it has an 84.17 square foot sign. So the property in question is the yellow outlined property here. It includes in common ownership these 2 parcels here. The sign is actually up in this area where you see the crosshairs on the screen. So it's most visible from the interchange area. This is a photo from the north side of Broadway looking south to southeast. It's kind of swinging a little bit to the right to see it in context with the building. And then zooming out and giving a little more context, almost straight south, then you can also see that Come and Go has a pole sign that was approved back when they were developed under a planned unit development at the time. So they were granted the right to have a pole sign at that time, even though it's a fairly new development. This is the approved site plan, and north is to the right. The addition is in this area to the east. The sign is in this location. The site plan doesn't actually show the sign or the marking of the area for trailer storage. So, but that's the general location of it in this area. The application made by the applicant, they're wanting to retain it mainly due to the importance of being visible to over-the-road haulers that are their customers for refrigeration service. I believe they're known in the industry as one of the better refrigeration service companies. And so they want to maintain that exposure. They're also indicating the relativity to the highway and comparing it to the other sign with come and go, as you know, giving some context to the character of the area as well. I'm going to zoom back out. This is actually showing dimensions, so you got a sense of the height of the sign. So it has a 14-foot clearance basically beneath it. I'm sure they don't want to have tractor trailers hitting their sign underneath, so they've got the necessary clearance. You can get the sense of the scale of the face. This also then shows it sort of in relativity to at a different angle. This was a photo that they provided. This is cards that we received. And I believe they are just the subject property perhaps, but they're both in favor. So I'm not actually, they must be like very small segments that are showing up here on the map. So and looks like I missed putting the staff report in there, but I will jump over to that quickly. Staff is cognizant of the City Council's intention with the new code to gradually convert pole signs to monument signs in terms of freestanding signs. From that standpoint, it becomes a variance in order to allow the pole sign to remain. But looking at the other provisions of the code applicable to monument signs, we believe they can achieve the same purpose and intent by providing a monument sign at essentially the same height and neat at 22.5 feet. They would get that relief as an exception rather than a variance, and would not need to demonstrate that unnecessary hardship test. So staff believes that the exception, they do have practical difficulty given the surrounding conditions and achieving the intent of the exposure that they are looking for their clientele. So we would be supportive of a type 2 zoning exception to give it that height as a monument type sign, essentially in the same location. They would need to make sure it would be set back 25 feet from property lines, which I believe the location of the existing sign already meets that, but they would have some flexibility if they needed to place it. But we do not believe that they meet or demonstrated the unnecessary hardship necessary for the board to grant a variance to retain the existing pole sign. So we were not able to support that and would recommend denial of that. there are, with regard to allowing any sign, I just want to make sure that they are aware that that does require a building permit for the new monument type sign that staff would be recommending. So I do want to point that out. Are there any questions?
Do we have questions for Eric from the board? Eric, I've got a couple questions, and this might prompt some of my board members if they have something related to ask. You've mentioned that you're recommending approval of an exception that would still allow for a pretty tall sign, even if we, quote, do a monument sign. If they would do that, I'm just trying to visualize what this would look like. They'd have to have the appropriate monument base that would need to be at least as wide as the sign face. But then would they be allowed to put a pole above that monument base? Or would the sign width have to be kind of parallel with the width of the foundation, if you follow my thinking here?
The sign base would have to be all the way, that entire component beneath the sign face. So there
Okay.
wouldn't be any allowance for a gap in there.
Yeah.
It has
So
to
what
be the full, yeah, now that the minimum base would be 25%, which they would have no trouble meeting in that case. They could go a little bit wider if they needed to get the area that they're
Right.
seeking, but
So my reason for that question, first of all, you answered it. So if I visualize this, they would wind up with a sign that has quite a lot more, quote, area to it. It would look like a monolith, much like, 2001: A Space Odyssey, the movie. Wouldn't that draw greater concern for sign size and volume than if they left the existing pole sign as is?
I don't believe that would be a concern from the staff perspective. I think you probably see these types of tall monument signs throughout the metro in newer development.
Okay, all right.
It would be a little bit of a concern if it was more in a proximity to a pedestrian situation. Yeah, but in this context, I don't believe that would be a concern.
And related to them, they went through site plan with their expansion. Was issues of requirements for monument signage, or that the old pole sign could not be, quote, grandfathered in? Was that not discussed during site plan review or brought to the attention of the applicant?
Their site plan project actually predated the new code. So I believe that the sign discussion came after even making the addition. I'll let the applicant answer that, but we generally in pre-apps, we point out that all signage is subject to getting sign permits from licensed sign contractors. I don't know if when this came in for pre-app at that point, if we were already pretty cognizant of the notion that the new code was going to trigger that removal of the pole signs.
And when you reference the new code, are you referencing the sign ordinance code that in essence said no more pole signs, not the recent comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance rehaul? Or both?
Yeah, it was, and the sign code's part of it, chapter 134. So it's embedded that the applicable sections in your staff report.
Gotcha.
That points to that triggering. It's either an expansion when a site plan is either changing the use of a building or it's an expansion of the building, then the sign removal is triggered as part of the site plan.
All right. And just one more quick one. I'm sorry here, but in visualizing this, they've got a building that may or may not be 22 feet tall itself, but do they have any signage on the building facade? And let's say they don't, would they have rights to put a sign on the facade of the building that could be perhaps almost equivalent to the size of the sign they have now?
They earn signage on the building, and it appears they have signage on that facade just behind the
Okay.
pole sign.
Yep. I see the letters.
Again, I think, Thermo King is a brand, not
Right.
necessarily the name of their business, but it's a brand that's recognized. And so
Got it.
I think it's known throughout the cartage
Yep.
industry as for refrigerated service. So
Got it. Okay.
I believe that they're really pointing to that important element.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all the questions that I have. Fellow board members, were there any other questions for Eric? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the applicant. The applicant's representative has up to 10 minutes for you to present your reasoning for your appeal. We need you to start with your name, with spelling if needed, and the address of who you're representing. And if you need to, either raise your hand or staff will grant you authority here. So we'll turn it over to you, the applicant.
Okay.
All right, do we have the applicant with us? Can we, do we know who they are, Bert?
Yes, it looks like Matt Reblock just unmuted himself, so he should be.
There he is.
Yep, I did. Yep, I'm here now. Yeah. So is Kevin Barnes, are you on the line too with Weezer Brothers?
I see a
Okay.
Kevin Barnes. Is that what you said, Kevin Barnes?
Yeah, is he on the call? Right, we're not.
I see
together.
I see him shown, and he's unmuted as well.
Am I there now?
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
You got me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about
Please
that.
take turns, though. Please take turns.
Yeah. I'd ask again, the first speaker, you've got up to 10 minutes. So if you want to share your time, you can. It would need to be one after the other, and we'll need your name and complete address for both of you. Whoever would like to go first.
Kevin will take the lead on this. So.
All right, well, Kevin Barnes, I'm with Weezer Brothers General Contracting. We're out of La Crescent, Minnesota. We're the general contractor, developer of this site. Let me start by addressing the interpretation of the definition given to me at the pre-construction meeting with the city. There was some discussion about the pole sign, but I was under the impression that that only applied to the recently acquired lot, which we expanded onto at 1592 East Broadway. And any signs that may be present on that property when those two were merged would need to go. At no time did I take away an understanding that this existing Thermo King sign would be in jeopardy and be removed. And that, again, I thought it was grandfathered in, having been there for some time. So be that as it may, it was my interpretation. And then further in the documentation from the city, there's another discussion of exterior signs, which simply talks to new signs and the need for permits, and a little bit of language as far as size and various things. But again, at no time did I think that this existing Thermo King sign would be removed. As for the comment on the full width monument sign up to 22 feet tall, I think most of the time you'll find that those signs are installed in multi-tenant retail applications where there's now room for multiple signs on one or both sides of this large sign that can go from ground clear up to whatever the limitations are. And oftentimes they are backlit, much as this Thermo King sign is currently backlit. And also to address the the signage on the building, they are not lit signs, and so largely only visible during daylight hours. So just to expand a little bit on the visibility and the required visibility for truckers, transient truckers that may or may not be from the area. Even in today's visibility, if you drive either direction on the ramp, off ramp, the adjacent, I don't know if it's 65, I believe, there, even with the trees there, it's somewhat difficult to see that sign in the daylight, although at night it's easier because, again, it's illuminated. So the importance of it being there with the logo is critical to defining where that trucker might go, and hopefully before he goes past the off ramp in either direction of that access point. I think beyond that, that's really all I've got. I've illuminated or outlined many of the other items in my narrative, and I think that they were explained fairly well. So Matt, if you've got something else to add, feel free.
No, I think Kevin summed it up pretty well. I just, as the ownership of this facility and property, we just put in between buying the extra lot next door and kind of cleaning that all up and taking kind of what was an eyesore there, and putting up the construction addition of our new building, a new shop there. We've got quite an investment there, and we definitely need to keep drawing our essential truck driving traffic into that facility. So it's very important for us to maintain that. And at no point did I ever dream that sign would have to go away, I guess, throughout this process. So that's kind of where we're at with this.
Okay. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you for your information. If you're okay with taking some questions here, we can see if the board members have any questions for you. Board members, any questions for the applicants? Guys, I guess I would just ask or throw in here, based on the site plan requirements during your expansion, I'm assuming you had to install additional landscaping on the front edges of the property. If so, has all that been completed?
Yes, that has been completed.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Anybody else have any question for the applicants? As far as the board?
Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead, Justin.
Thank you. It's my understanding what's being suggested by staff is that they could still have a sign there. It would just be kind of in a different form. And so I guess to the applicant, I'm wondering, would that suffice, or are they saying that the new type of sign would be still detrimental to their business?
It may suffice. The problem is it's a huge investment, number one, that we already have an investment there. And it doesn't really, from what I'm hearing, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I'm hearing, it's going to accomplish the same thing. It's going to have a different look, but to Kevin's point, we don't need that different look. We don't need to add a bunch of different other, logos on there. We just strictly need that Thermo King logo that's hanging out there right now.
I guess just to follow up with that then, is because that's not your name, but that's a brand that you use, and that's a brand within the industry, right? As a high
Correct.
brand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, it is.
And you think that if you didn't, you could still use that brand, it would still draw people in, even if it looked a little bit different or had a different base, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? All right. Then what we'll do, we'll move to the next part of the hearing. We'll see if there's anybody here in the audience that wishes to speak in support of the applicant's request. They can have up to 5 minutes to speak. So if you'd like to speak in support of the applicant's request to retain their pole sign, either hit the participant raise your hand icon in Zoom or hit *9 on your telephone to be recognized. Staff, do we have?
I do
Anybody?
not see anybody else.
Okay, all right. Okay, if there's nobody else to speak in support, do we have anybody to speak in opposition? Would be the same sign. Hit the participant raise hand in the Zoom app or hit *9 on your phone if you'd like to speak in opposition to the applicant's request to retain the pole sign. And going once, going twice.
I do not see anybody here either.
Same thing for those in neutrality, although I can't see why you'd be idling out of gear. Anybody who wishes to speak in neutral terms on this one? Okay, seeing none, do we have any comments from the zoning enforcement officer? Don't have to, but if there aren't any, just please acknowledge.
It doesn't look like Sue Ann is going to weigh in.
Okay, thank you, Bert. Okay, we didn't have anybody speak in support, opposition, or neutral, so the applicant has given their testimony. Do we have any questions for city staff?
Chair, members of the board, this is Sue Ann Donovan. I was having trouble with finding my mute button.
Sorry, Sue Ann, go ahead.
It's all right. My bad. I would, at this point, state that I think we have really tried hard as staff to make sure that we honor the commitment of the city council and eliminate pole signs in the city. I think there is an opportunity for them to put up a sign that will serve their purposes without having it be a pole sign. So I would argue that they put up a monument sign.
Okay, all right, thank you, Sue Ann. Okay, what we'll do, since zoning enforcement officer spoke, I don't think, do we have any more questions from the city staff? If none, Kevin, I will give you two an opportunity if you want to do any rebuttal or add a closing comment here to cap this off before we vote on this. You've got up to 3 minutes. If you'd like to use it, you don't have to, you don't want.
I don't have any further things to add.
Okay, all right, thank you, gentlemen. Okay, we'll close the public portion then and go to board deliberation. So the board will discuss the item and then see if we have any motions from the members. Any thoughts from anyone?
Mr. Chair, this is Cindy Smith.
Yes.
I don't see a real big issue with allowing them to keep the pole sign. The come and go sign right next to them is a pole sign. And the location of this business and the sign is pretty far away from any residential streets. I mean, it's pretty set back. It's pretty far set back. They've invested a lot of money in improving that area and trying to upgrade what they've got there. The sign has been there for numerous years and has served the purpose it needs to serve. I understand where the city's coming, or the city council's coming from in terms of their monument signs. And I think it's important when it's a visual distraction, when it's, close to city streets, you can have lots of passengers and such going by. And I know it's a very busy area there, but this is so far set back. And the come and go sign is a pole sign. The sign that they have now just seems to me to fit. Just
right.
Opinion.
Yep. Okay, very well spoken. Other thoughts or opinions?
I'll weigh in. This is Nathan Blake. I don't necessarily disagree with kind of the core of what Cindy's saying, and that it makes a lot of sense to me for them to keep it, but I don't think that it comports with what the city council has passed with respect to their view of what's appropriate for signage now in the city. And I don't think that the applicant has met the variance test. So I'd be willing to go along with what the staff has recommended to allow them to have kind of this alternative, which I understand will be probably more expensive. I don't have super strong feelings about the aesthetics of pole signs, and I have maybe like a preference for monument signs, but clearly the city council has, staked out a pretty absolute position on it. And I think I think I guess where I'm at is I don't view the applicant as having met the variance test.
Okay, also very well put. Other thoughts from the board? I'll go ahead and throw in here as well then. I very much was a supporter of the ordinance to bring our scale of signs down to scale. In fact, I served on the Board of Adjustment when we did ask the City Council to consider a ordinance to better regulate and prevent the proliferation of pole signs. At one time, we had an allowance in this city for restaurants and other services near a highway to have signs that were 30 and 40 feet tall on a pole. The goal was to bring signs down to scale and eventually phase out pole signs at the time redevelopment of a site was being considered. So I understand where the gentlemen were maybe a little confused that, well, gee, we were just doing this part and this was pre-existing and we didn't think that would draw this in, and we just didn't know. Sometimes people ask for forgiveness rather than permission. I can take that into account myself just a little bit, but in looking at the bigger picture, sometimes we cut off our nose to spite our face here. Here we have city staff advocating for an exception to allow for a monument sign that would be much taller than allowed, but that monument sign, in essence, the space it takes out, the view it blocks, the square area the sign would be much, much larger. And to me, have a much greater impact on the site, on the right of way and the neighborhood than the existing pole sign does now. In fact, in the scope and scale of the property, it's actually kind of small. So although I would normally advocate for removing of a pole sign and doing a monument sign, the staff proposal actually would be a larger sign. Since the applicant completed their site plan to, from what I understand, met all the other requirements on landscaping, I would be in favor of allowing them to retain this pole sign, kind of as an as-is. However, if the sign becomes damaged according to the city ordinance, or they'd want to take it down on their own, then they'd have to comply with the sign ordinance if they chose to replace it. That's just part of the regulation. That's the way I understand it anyway. But those are just my thoughts. So we've got kind of both sides of the aisle here. Does anybody have any other thoughts then, or perhaps a motion?
Mr. Chair, this is Cindy. I would move to approve the variance and allow them to keep the pole sign.
Okay. All right. Is that clear enough for the record, Judy, from your perspective?
Yes, I think that will be sufficient.
Okay. All right. Would there be a second for Cindy's motion, grant a variance for the sign? I'll go ahead and second that. Just keep things moving. Don't mean to steal anybody's thunder there. So we've got a motion by Cindy, a second by Mel, to grant a variance to retain the existing pole sign. So we're voting aye to grant the variance, or nay not to grant the variance. So Bert?
All right, Marlos Jones,
Nay.
Justin Gross,
Nay.
Nathan Blake,
Nay.
Cindy Smith,
Aye.
Mel Pence.
Aye.
Motion failed 2-3.
Okay, and again, as I said, it always takes 4 votes to grant a variance or any appeals. So the motion does not pass. I would encourage you guys to really sit down and talk with city staff on what the options can be in either, again, dealing with that sign. Do we have the option, since that motion in essence didn't pass, do we have the option to consider a secondary approach, which would be to grant the what the city had put out there as an exception level?
Yes, a board member could make a subsequent motion.
Right, I concur.
I'll move the staff recommendation of denying the variance and granting, what is it now called? Type 2 zoning exception level.
Correct.
Okay, so we got a motion by Nathan. Would there be a second?
I will second that.
All right, second by Marla. So all those in favor of granting an exception level variance as presented by city staff, say yay if you're in support of that. We'll take roll.
All right, Justin Gross,
Yay.
Nathan Blake,
Yay.
Cindy Smith,
Yay.
Marlis Jones,
Yay.
Mel Pins.
Yay.
Motion
All right,
carries 5-0.
So guys, it looks like you have a consolation prize here. It may not be a prize you want to receive, but I think that's the best that this board can do for you here today. So I encourage you to work with city staff when that decision and order comes out, and they can help clarify how that decision will apply and then what your options are. So I thank you very much for your time today. Okay, so that'll move us on then. Our next item, since 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 have been continued, that'll move us to item 9, a conditional use approval request at 2127 Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Catherine Dostart, planner for the city of Des Moines. As mentioned, this is a item looking as a conditional use permit. It is located at 2121 Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway, and they are looking to allow sales of alcoholic liquor, wine, and beer with no more than 40% of gross receipts from those sales.
Okay.
Just a little aerial so you can see where the site's located. This is along north and southbound Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway. It's across from the O'Reillys and the Burger King just south of the intersection with Hickman. Couple of photos just to give you a little bit of context. You may recall that this property has been in front of you previously, so it might look a little familiar. Here's a layout as provided by the applicant of what the interior of the store would look like. So staff is recommending approval of this request with a number of conditions. We can go through those in detail if you would so like, but generally we've worked with this applicant before and the board has previously approved other locations of that they are associated with similar conditions, and so we have done our best to both incorporate previously approved conditions by the board for other locations and from previous approval on this location as well.
Okay.
Here is the decision and order from 2015. And if you want, I can zoom in or not, but you'll see that the conditions are generally along the same lines. We've had to update a few things over the years and based on the new zoning ordinance. Copy of our consent map. We received just the one card and then a letter from the neighbor via email. And then we've also, the one card is from the associated operator of the facility. and then a copy of the email from the neighbor. And then we received a number of letters from the neighborhood association, as well as nearby neighborhood associations who also have this particular operator in their neighborhood who have been working there. So feel free to just let me know if you want to go back and read any of these in detail.
Okay. So, Catherine, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but in general, the letters and comments, are all those generally supportive of what they're asking to do here?
Yes.
Okay.
Most of them have either been from, as mentioned, from neighborhoods or associations that have this operator operating in them. And they are generally favorable. And as you can see from the consent map, the neighbor who did respond to our mailing is also in support of this business.
Okay. All right. Okay, so questions for Catherine from the board? Anyone? Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead then. Thank you, Catherine. Let's go ahead and hear from the applicant. The applicant's got up to 10 minutes to present their reasoning for their request for this conditional use approval. We just need them to begin again with their name and address.
Hi, this is Eric Estes. The address is 2121 ML King Parkway, Des Moines.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Eric.
We first of all, we'd like to thank you for considering our request. We operate the store on 6th Avenue. We were in front of you about 1.5 years ago, and we got approval there. And since then, we've had a successful run. We're an integrated part of our communities, and now we're moving on to this location. We're very involved in the neighborhoods. We regularly attend neighborhood meetings. We support local groups in the neighborhoods. We just have a lot of support in the community. We've put a lot of money and time into remodeling these locations, to update them and make them a positive aspect of the community. And this store, we're going to provide similar products and services that we provide at 6th Avenue. We have hot food. We have a lot of groceries, a lot of frozen items. Many people in the neighborhoods, there's no grocery stores close, so they come to us for all of their needs. And we're just trying to provide that for them, as well as, make a living. We, myself and my partner Merle, we operate the stores ourselves. We regularly work at the counters. We're in the stores every day. And we're a big part of the community. I don't know if Merle's also on the call. I don't know if you want to say something too.
My name is Merle Latchlow. Eric's covered. I would like to point out that
can you guys hear Merle? I'm not sure. Are you unmuted?
I hear somebody in the background there. They might need to speak up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Just need your full name and address.
My name's Merle. The address is 2121 ML King. Basically what Eric had said is pretty well addresses everything. I would like to point out that we have 5 or 6 employees at 6th Avenue, all of which are from the neighborhood. So we feel like we're, providing opportunities for our neighborhood as well. But Eric's pretty much touched base on every other point that I would make.
Okay. All right. Good enough. Okay. All right. Well, guys, if you're okay with this, we'll see if the board has any questions for you. Board members?
Oh, gee.
We've got someone that has both a cell phone and a computer microphone going at the same time. Okay, that's a little bit better. Board members, do we have any questions for the applicants? Anyone from the board with a question? Guys, I'll just go ahead and ask you two quick ones. How long have you been managing the operations at this location? And what are your sales hours? And would those change based on, it looks like it'd be no later than 11 to sell liquor here with proposal. All right, Bert?
Since they muted themselves, staff's unable to unmute them.
Okay. Yeah, so guys.
Sorry,
okay.
I had my thing muted. I didn't realize it.
That's okay, happens all the time. So basically, how long have you been operating at this location on ML King? And are you okay with the limited hours to be able to sell the hard liquor?
Yes, so we leased both of these locations at the same time. And then we're okay with all the conditions that the staff has recommended. They're basically the same as what we have on 6th Avenue. It's been working pretty well. We don't have any problems. We've cleaned up all these locations. We don't allow any loitering. We cooperate with the police and the city. So it all seems to work for us. So I guess we're okay with all that. It seems to be going pretty well, so.
Okay, glad to hear that. All right, board members, any other question for the applicant? Okay, seeing none then, thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony. We'll go ahead and see if there's anybody in the audience here who would like to speak in support of your request. If anybody would like to speak in support, they can have up to 5 minutes. Just need you to use the raise hand icon if you're participating on the computer with Zoom, or hit *9 on your phone, be asked to be recognized. So anybody that wishes to speak in support?
I do not see any.
Okay. All right, do we have anybody that wishes to speak in opposition? Same sign to be recognized.
Eric?
Go ahead.
I don't see anybody either.
Okay. All right. And anybody to speak in neutrality? I'll spend about 2 seconds on that. Okay, seeing none. Based on that, any questions from or anything the zoning enforcement officer would like to say?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for staff from the board?
Mr. Chair, this is Cindy. Whatever decision is made, would it run with the building, the land, like, for example, if new owners, it looks like Eric and Merle are doing a terrific job as owners and supporters of these communities. But what if some other owners were to step forth and buy them out?
Sure.
Good question.
This is Bert Drost. The conditional use permit does run with the land. However, if you look at condition number 15, we've tried to address that. We said any business selling alcoholic liquor, wine, or beer shall operate with an owner-operator model, where the owners of the business runs the day-to-day operations of the business. So we've tried to, that condition really limits it to the type of owner-operator that we could have at this site in the future if it would change hands.
Right. Yeah, I think Cindy has an excellent question, something we always have to keep in mind. And to add to that, with a conditional use permit, if we do see concerns with it, just because we've approved it does not mean that it can't come back to us with any conditional use permit. If the zoning enforcement officer determines there's problems, it can be brought back to us for consideration for revocation. It's kind of like having a driver's license with conditions. You don't comply with those, it can get taken away. Any other questions from the board? Okay, all right. Guys, you get to have the last say if you so choose. Any closing comments you'd like to add about your request? And if none, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we've stated everything that we wanted to state.
Okay.
I would like to say I appreciate the staff kind of guiding us through this process since I've never done it on my own before.
Sure, and they always appreciate a good word on the great assistance that they do give to all of our applicants for this stuff. Okay, all right. Well, then we'll go ahead and close the public portion and go to board deliberation. Any initial thoughts among the members?
Chair, this is Justin Gross. I'd just like to, I guess, say that I think they have a good history with the neighborhoods that they're in. And they have support, obviously, from the neighborhood associations and other organizations in the neighborhoods. And since they are in agreement to follow the conditions set forth by the staff, I would, I guess I would move to approve staff recommendation.
Okay, so we do have a motion by Justin. We can have some further discussion and or a second on that. Other board members?
I'll second his motion. This is Cindy.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second there. Okay, well then we'll go ahead and vote to grant the conditional use approval subject to the staff conditions. All those in favor, we'll take roll call. Say aye if you're in favor.
Nathan Blake,
Aye.
Cindy Smith,
Aye.
Marlis Jones,
Aye.
Justin Gross,
Aye.
Mel Pins.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, guys, it sounds like you're doing a great job in the neighborhoods you're serving all the way around here. Keep up that good work and you'll get a copy of that decision in order here by this time next week. Thank you for your time today. Okay, that'll bring us to item 10. Item 10 is a zoning variance request at 4507 Grand Avenue.
Chair, members of the board, Jason Van Essen with the city's planning staff. The proposal is to install a freestanding sign, generally 8 by 4 feet with a total area of 29.56 square feet. The request requires 3 variances that you see listed on the agenda. A variance to the provision that requires any freestanding sign to be a monument sign. Variance of that would allow 1 freestanding sign over the maximum allowed 0 freestanding signs allowed for a bed and breakfast use in the NX2 district. So we're dealing with a bed and breakfast and new owner continuing a use. So I think when you see the pictures, you'll recognize the property. And then the last variance is of, since there's no allotment for signage, then there would be no allowance, for area. So the last variance is to grant the area of the proposed sign.
Okay.
Let's see, here we go. Aerial identifying the subject property on the north side of Grand Avenue, kind of the T intersection of 45th Street. This is a little pulled back, little larger area map. I just thought this might be of assistance in thinking about the different uses in the area. There's a variety of residential uses of different scales and sizes. Mixture of NX2. Actually, you can see most of the area along Grand is zoned NX2, some NX2 to the east. Photograph of the subject property from Grand Avenue. As you approach it, you can see the start to see the building through the trees there on the right. More of a straightforward shot. There is a small sign that's there that's legal non-conforming from when the bed and breakfast use was first established.
Okay.
In your packet, you had a copy of the staff report. I'll go ahead and jump to the staff recommendation, and then we can kind of sort through the rest of the material. We as staff are recommending denial of the variance for the monument sign relief. We believe the monument sign style sign can't be constructed here. We do support the variance to allow a sign. Right now in the NX2 district, a bed and breakfast is an allowed use, but there's no provision for signage in the zoning code, and it's something I think that's going to have to be looked at. The variance for the area, we are recommending denial of as proposed. In looking at what seems to be a good size, appropriate size, we did look at other multifamily uses or uses in that area that we allowed in the NX district. We feel with the scale and the size of the property that looking at a comparable massing of units for, like, say, a 16 or more unit building, there's a maximum area of 24 square feet for those. And so we feel that there's kind of some comparable needs and are basing our recommendation for 24 square feet on that. We do have some other conditions you can see listed in there, just how to go about constructing the sign, making sure that the base generally matches the building with brick, and then also getting a permit and sign contractor, very standard language.
Okay.
I won't go, read through, but just if in case the applicant needs to refer to these next few slides, I'll flip them quick. These are here. This is just language they included or their rationale in their application. We have some additional photographs that they provided showing the property. We can come back to these. Some of them have notes on them that I'm imagining they'll need for their presentation. Image of the sign as proposed. This is the response map. And then I'll go ahead and flip through response cards, and there's an email that I'll give you more time to look at than these cards. But at any point you'd like to go back to these, just let me know. Happy to pull them back up. And then I'll give you a little bit longer on this email. Mel, let me know when you'd like me to move to the second page of the email.
And I'll let my members weigh in here as well. Could you make that just a shade bigger, if possible?
Sure. You bet. Great idea.
Yeah, there we go. Right there. Perfect. All right, and maybe you can bring us down a little further. There we go. Okay. And Jason, just for my review, is Mr. Graziano commenting as an individual, or is he representing an organization here?
He's commenting as an individual. He owns the neighboring property, and I believe he's called in and can speak
okay.
during
right.
the comment period.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Anything else you want to add, Jason?
I'm happy to answer any questions. I just want to, reiterate that that we think they have a unnecessary hardship in identifying their business, given the size of the property and the speed and volume of traffic on Grand Avenue. When you looked at those pictures that I showed, the road curves as well, making it challenging to see that smaller sign that's there today. And then also highlight that right now, the way the zoning code is written, there is no sign allowance for a bed and breakfast business in this zoning district. And that's something that as staff, we need to look at. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Jason? From the board. Jason, are there allowances for any lighting on the sign, either exterior lighting pointing out the sign or backlighting, or would you have a constriction against that in what the city has proposed?
I want to confirm what if being backlit is allowed for a sign in the zoning district, that would apply. I know if, at the beginning of the staff report, we have the code section that applies here. Let me check that and let you know.
Yeah, if you can help us with that during this agenda item. Yeah, if you got to do a little look in here, great. Okay, do we have other questions for Jason from the board?
Mel, if I could, I do have the answer for you.
Oh, great. Okay.
So the sign could be illuminated by indirect illumination only.
Got it. Okay. All right. Very good. All right. Thank you, sir. Okay. Going once, going twice for any questions for Jason from the board. Okay. Hearing none. We'll go ahead and give the floor to the applicant. They've got up to 10 minutes to present their case for their reasoning for this appeal. We just need them to start off with their complete name and address as appropriate. And unless somebody's on mute, either themselves or staff, do you have the appellant unmuted?
It's Daniel Manning Jr. I believe he's now unmuted.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Dan. Welcome.
Okay, great. Daniel Manning Jr. I'm an attorney with the Lillis O'Malley Law Firm, 317 6th Avenue, Suite 300, Des Moines, Iowa, 50324. Here today representing the applicant owner, Cheryl Moore. Just want to confirm that Cheryl is on as well. Cheryl, are you there? Okay, well, I'm speaking for the applicant today, and this property is located at 4507 Grand Avenue. It is known locally as the Butler House. Historically, I think since the late 80s, the use on this property has been a traditional bed and breakfast. To our knowledge, it's the only one in the area. And today we're obviously asking for a sign variance for that bed and breakfast. Jason, is it possible to go to our design that you showed a little earlier?
Yeah, happy to do so.
Okay, thank you. So this is what we're proposing. This is what we're wanting and asking for with our variance today. We think that Iowa Sign Company has done a good job here creating a tasteful and attractive sign that really lends itself to identifying a historic bed and breakfast with, its common name locally as the Butler House. And we agree with the staff report and Jason earlier when we talk about, what is the hardship here. The hardship is really identification. And the fact that, cars traveling at 30 miles per hour on Grand along that area where it curves, which you can see from that aerial, it'll come up quick. And some of the geographic challenges or the topography of the site is that it sits back on a hill, kind of a steep hill down onto Grand, and also has a lot of tree coverage. So, we picture folks, guests flying in, driving down Grand, trying to find this property, and recognize that it can be kind of a challenge to find it. And a sign like this, we believe, will enhance identification and visibility for guests. Obviously, a sign doesn't, if it's too small, will not serve the intended purpose of allowing you to find it or to identify what the sign is showing. And so the sign, you can see there's a little sign out there, and I think that's a perfect example of a sign that is too small, kind of defeats the purpose of having a sign at all. So when we go through this so I think we've identified the hardship, which is simply identification. That's our hardship, and that's why we think a variance for a larger sign is necessary. When we go through the 3-step test here, we believe that right now in its existing state, we're losing beneficial and productive use because of people's failure to identify this property and the fact that it is different from surrounding properties. The unique circumstances, which is the second element, we believe that the use is unique in that it's a bed and breakfast. There's not any bed and breakfast that we know of in the area. And so that is what makes it unique from that standpoint, but also just the topography of the site, the way that it sits back on a hill on that bend in the road, kind of with a lot of tree coverage. And that also makes it unique from other properties on Grand that are, on a flatter lot that are easier to identify. And then third, we believe that it will not alter the character of the area because it's been a bed and breakfast for a long time. It's going to stay that way. This part of town, obviously, is a beautiful kind of historic area. And we think that this kind of a historic use, fits right into the neighborhood, and a sign will, only enhance its visibility and people's ability to find it. So that's, just kind of walking through those elements with you. But to end here, and then I guess if I have any additional time and if Cheryl is on and she wants to say anything, I would give that to Cheryl, the owner. But basically the city has recommended a monument sign that's a little smaller. We would ask, I think they're recommending a 24 square foot monument sign. We are asking for what you're looking at now, this design, which is 29.56 square feet. It's not that much bigger than what the city's proposing, but we do think we need that much signage in order for people to be able to see it. We think it'll be a nice addition to the property to provide adequate visibility and at the size that we are making the application for, which is 29.56 square feet. And we think, there are going to be a lot of guests to the site that have maybe never been to Des Moines before, never been to this part of town, maybe coming for a one-time only business trip or something. And really just, it will help them to identify the site and the fact that it's their bed and breakfast. So with that, I will give any remaining time I have to Cheryl Moore, and happy to answer any questions from the board. And
Hey,
I
Dan,
will, yes.
for the purposes of the hearing, I think if it's okay with you, we can give Cheryl 5 minutes to speak in support of herself. If that's okay with you, I'd just prefer an opportunity if we could ask you a few questions.
Sure. Is Cheryl on the call?
I am on.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
I would just say if you have anything to add, if the board has any questions for you,
Yeah.
feel free to go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you to the board. I really appreciate the opportunity to present this to you for your consideration, and I appreciate you hearing me out. I'm a national expert on life insurance and annuities. My husband is a home builder who has been tied to the community for more than 2 decades in building. But we also buy distressed houses and fix them up, make them look nice in the community, and then rent them out. This was a unique real estate investment for us just because my business, all of my employees are located throughout the United States because I hire people who have been displaced or had their jobs downsized by insurance companies. And I fly my employees in a couple of times a year so that everyone can work together in our Des Moines offices. This is actually a house that's located around the corner from my own home. So I can go from my front door to the Butler house in 3 minutes. I do appreciate the historical nature and beauty of the South of Grand neighborhood because I'm a part of that, and I have been for going on 4 years. What's interesting is that although I live just a few minutes away and my child attends Bergman Academy, which is a private school that is located right down the street that is across the street from the Butler house, I never knew of the existence of the Butler house until it went up for sale, and there was some sort of scandal with a nonprofit organization that supports convicts or former drug addicts with rehabilitating, making an offer on this house, and an email being sent to the parents of Bergman Academy regarding that potential acquisition. I have driven by that house literally every day of the school year and never seen it for more than 3 years. Now, I will grant you that it was formerly obstructed quite a bit by evergreen bushes, which we have done a lot to clear up the front and make it more visible and help add to the aesthetic appeal of the community. But the challenge is that it is located very far back from the road, up on a very high hill. It is the first property going around the corner or the bend on Grand Avenue, and we've got 30-mile-per-hour traffic in there. And you can certainly appreciate that in the winter times when it gets darker earlier in the day, I'm concerned about challenges with our guests being able to find the Butler house because we will be running this as a bed and breakfast, not just for my employees, although that was the original motivation for us making the acquisition. I'm not trying to take away from the beauty of Grand Avenue at all, but I will tell you that we have owned this property since the first week of May, and we work on it almost every single day, and we do most of the work ourselves. We order food to the house 1 or 2 times a day while we are there working on it, and none of the people from DoorDash or Grubhub can find the house, despite knowing the address and having GPS. It is very awkward because I share a parking lot with a condominium complex that is adjacent to my property, and people cannot enter my property from the front because the condominium complex owns the parking lot or the parking spots that are touching my property where the entrance to the front of the house is. And this is just because the former owner of the condominium complex acquired the Butler house at one point and decided to make modifications to the property line so that it could better accommodate the people living in the condominiums. So I would say it's a very strange lot situation in terms of parking and accessibility, and we plan to make some changes to that with the board's approval in future years. But for now, I just need for people to know that we're here, what we are, and that they're in the right place if they're not familiar with us. So I greatly appreciate your consideration. I'm not trying to cause any undue burden on anyone, but we are a commercial business. We have been run as such since the 80s. There is a strip mall that's located just a couple of properties down from me. And of course, the art center is across the street. So what I'm trying to do is tastefully get something that is in the spirit of my 100-year-old Tudor English home, and maybe not so consistent with a new construction business property. And that's why I'm making the appeal to you at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Board members, do we have any question for the applicant and their attorney? Anybody? Going once, going twice? Yes, go ahead.
I do. Sorry, I think was repeatedly muting and unmuting myself. This is Nathan Blake.
You might need to see a counselor about that.
Yeah. I'd like to blame my kids on that, but I can't, unfortunately.
Go ahead, Nathan.
I didn't hear, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear really any argument about why it needs to be a pole sign rather than a monument sign as required by the city. So I'd be interested in hearing a justification of why. I did hear a case for why the sign itself needs to be there, but not that.
I'm happy to address that. My husband and I have worked in real estate investing, and him in the construction industry for about 25 years. And I, first of all, did try and make an attempt to find brick that would match my house to accommodate that monument style. But ultimately, what we found would not match this 100-year-old brick, and nothing would even come close. And when I got the mock-ups from the Des Moines Sign Company, they looked like a new construction sign to me. And I understand that it is a sign that's being newly constructed, but it's for a 100-year-old English Tudor home. And so I'm trying to make it look more in the character and the branding of our property rather than like a new construction business. And that was my motivation for asking for the pole sign.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have other questions for the applicant? Going once, going twice. Okay, we thank you for your testimony. We'll do a round robin here of those participating in the hearing yet. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in support of the applicant's request? Hit the raise your hand sign or *9 on your phone to be recognized. And I'll ask staff to monitor that. Anyone?
Nobody.
Okay. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak in opposition? Same opportunity to participate. Hit the raise hand sign.
Yes, Craig Graziano has his hand raised.
All right, Mr. Graziano, go ahead. We just need your complete name and address again, and you've got up to 5 minutes. All right, Mr. Graziano, I'm hoping we have you unmuted here. If you're participating by phone, you may need to unmute yourself. I think that's *6.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I had a number of messages on my screen about muting and unmuting. I'm sorry. My name is Craig Graziano. I live at 544th Street, which is on the corner of 44th and Grand, adjacent to the subject property on the east. I look forward to meeting my new neighbors, but this came as a complete surprise to me, and I have to oppose their application. You have my letter. You had it up on the screen a while ago. Grand Avenue in this vicinity is not a commercial street. It's an attractive residential street with the Des Moines Arts Center grounds on the opposite side. We don't have signs like this. The sign that is being proposed is nearly 8 by 4 feet with a surface area of roughly 30 square feet. That's nearly 15 times the surface area of the current 1 by 2 foot sign, which my memory tells me was actually the result of a prior variance or something, because I remember receiving a mailing from the city regarding it, and I responded I did not oppose that. And it's twice the surface area of the Art Center sign across the street, which serves much larger and public grounds and structures, which have a similar topography to the one that the applicant and her attorney have been describing. So the topography is not unique. Persons looking for a bed and breakfast don't need the sign. They will find the accommodations online. There's nothing unusual about a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit. As I said in my letter, the sign would be an eyesore. As the staff recommendation explains, a variance cannot legally be granted unless the applicant establishes each of the requirements for a finding of unnecessary hardship. That includes a requirement that the property cannot yield a reasonable return without a variance. Loss of optimal benefit or profit to the property is not enough. And it includes a requirement that the property owner's plight is due to unique circumstances, not of the property owner's own making. As the staff recommendation concludes, the applicant's proposal does not meet either of these requirements and therefore cannot legally be granted. If I'm reading it correctly, however, the staff goes on to say that if this property had 16 or more household dwellings, then the ordinance would permit a 24 square foot sign. So therefore, it would be okay if you granted a variance for a 24 square foot sign. I don't follow the logic. This property does not have 16 household dwellings. According to the staff recommendation, following another prior variance, the property has 7 bed and breakfast rooms instead of the maximum 4 that would be permitted without that prior variance. A bed and breakfast room is not the equivalent of an independent dwelling unit. Even if it were, 7 is not 16. If I'm reading the staff recommendation correctly, a multiple household structure with 8 to 15 units is permitted to put up a 4 square foot sign, and I don't see that any freestanding sign is allowed for 7 units. So in summary, I don't follow the staff logic of equating a 7-room bed and breakfast with a 16-unit multiple dwelling structure. Again, the staff concluded there has been no demonstration that the subject property cannot yield a reasonable return without a variance. That conclusion is fatal to the variance application, regardless of whether we're talking about a sign with a square footage of 30 feet or a sign with a square footage of 24 square feet. The other requirements for a variance are also not met. The staff recommendation does not identify circumstances that show that the plight of the property owner is unique to this property. It only references the same plight of any property owner that's not permitted a freestanding sign under the ordinance. As I mentioned at the outset, the sign would also be out of character with the neighborhood.
Okay.
Lastly, I did make a request, and I've made this request before, that persons who speak before the Board of Adjustment should be sworn on oath, and I'm happy to say that I'd be happy to certify that everything I'm saying is true and correct to the best of my knowledge under penalty of perjury. But for the record, I'd like to make that same request for everyone else who is speaking, that they make a similar statement. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Graziano, I thank you for your testimony and certainly for your honesty, which we certainly do expect from everyone. This is considered a quasi-judicial hearing. We certainly expect people to be truthful with our hearing requirements, but the hearing process is generally determined by Iowa law. I don't believe that it requires people to be, quote, sworn in. If that would be considered, I believe that would have to be brought at a minimum to city legal staff for review for future consideration. and more than likely to the city council if it's even possible. So you may wish to visit with city legal staff in the future on that request.
Oh, just consider the request made to all levels of the city.
Well, I'll let staff deal with that because our board is limited to today's agenda items and the process for the hearing as it's been presented to the board. Do we have any questions for Mr. Graziano? Going once, going twice. Okay, Mr. Graziano, I appreciate both your written testimony as well as your comments here. Thank you for participating. Do we have anybody else who wishes to speak in opposition to the applicant's request? Please hit the participant, raise your hand sign, or *9 on your phone to be recognized. Do we have anybody else, staff? Okay, all right. Do we have anybody that wishes to speak in neutrality per se? Same sign if so. Okay, hearing none. Zoning Enforcement Officer, do we have any comments, Sue-Ann?
Yes, I do. Chair, members of the board, Sue-Ann Donovan, Deputy Zoning Enforcement Officer for the City of Des Moines. I think several things. I don't often say that I'm not in support of staff recommendations, but I agree with the previous speaker. I'm not sure I quite understand the connection between a bed and breakfast and a multifamily for signage purposes. I don't believe that we want a full sign on Grand Avenue. I don't believe that's in character with the neighborhood. If there was a desire for the board to allow a monument sign, I think it should be smaller and in keeping with the character of the neighborhood, and it should be a monument sign. I also tend to agree that people who are trying to find a bed and breakfast are going to have the wayfinding accomplished before they get off of a plane or before they get in their car to get to the place. So I'm not sure they've met the variance test. So I guess in conclusion, I'm not in support of the plan for this sign that's being presented to the board today.
Okay. All right. I understand your concerns. Do we have any questions for city staff? I'd say Sue-Ann's already at the podium, but questions for either Sue-Ann or city staff from the board?
Mel, this is Jason with staff. Can I just provide one clarification?
Please do if you would like to, Jason, go ahead.
Yes, I want to reiterate that the zoning district that this property is located in allows bed and breakfast uses, but provides no allowance for a sign for a bed and breakfast use of any type or freestanding sign. So our effort was to look at something that would be allowed in that district of a certain scale that would be comparable and use that as a cross reference. It's not to make a case that the bed and breakfast is a multifamily use. It was merely to provide a baseline for what would be an appropriate size in that district, looking at other things allowed in that district.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the clarification. Questions for Jason or staff?
Yeah, I got a question for Jason. This is Nathan Blake. I mean, shouldn't the read then be, city council passed this zoning law and they allow signs in some instances for some situations, and they allow certain uses and then don't allow signs pretty explicitly for other uses like bed and breakfasts. I'm not seeing, I understand the sizing thing, but I guess I'm having a tough time along with Sue-Ann and Mr. Graziano, like trying to figure out what the justification is and how this request meets the variance test at all. I think makes eminent sense to me at some level, but that's not really what our charge is. The request makes sense. It just doesn't seem to meet the legal requirement.
Okay, all right. And Nathan, was that a statement or a question? I'm sorry, to Jason.
I guess it ended up being more of a statement, but I am interested in hearing a little more development of the staff's. I mean, because we are always charged, even if we're ever voting for a variance, we really need to be explicit about how it meets all of the factors. And I think I'm comfortable enough that it fits into the neighborhood sufficiently. I think we could probably design something or restrict it in some way that it does. And I don't think it's necessary. I think there's a case to be made that it's not necessarily of the applicant's own doing. I just really have a hard time figuring out how it meets the third prong of not being able to have any reasonable return, not just a kind of diminution in value. And I'm interested in hearing staff, just because if we were to vote that way, we would need to probably include some sort of justification for that.
Sure. And this is Jason Van Ness on staff again. And I want to just take a step back and clarify too, with the way the staff rationale is structured. Each paragraph addresses a different aspect or each individual variance. So, I mean, I'm happy to read to you what we wrote in the last paragraph. Is the applicant faces an unnecessary hardship in identifying their business given the size of the property, the speed and volume of traffic in Grand Avenue. The plight of the owner is due to unique circumstance related specifically to the subject property. The subject bed and breakfast use has legal non-conforming rights to operate, yet is not granted freestanding signage by the zoning code. So that's the basis for our recommendation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Any other questions for city staff from the board? Okay. All right. The appellant has a rebuttal. And I think we've been pretty gracious here to generally listen. I will give you up to 3 minutes for a rebuttal. You can decide who's going to do it, but I will time you on this one so we can stay on our schedule here.
Thank you. This is Daniel Manning Jr. again for the applicant. Cheryl, I'm going to take this one because we've had some legal questions that have come up. Obviously, Mr. Graziano went through the 3-part test. I went through the 3-part test, and I'm hearing Mr. Blake have some questions about the 3-part test. So I don't think there can be any denial that this is a unique property with a unique use off of Grand Avenue in Des Moines. So I think that box is checked. It's a bed and breakfast. The second, I might get these wrong in their order, but in order for this bed and breakfast to function and be able to exist as a bed and breakfast, it needs to be identifiable off of Grand. I think we've demonstrated why that's important and why this property is hard to identify. And I believe that speaks to the productive use of the subject property element that we've already discussed. The last part that Mr. Blake was talking about is how it doesn't alter the essential character of the area. The property itself is in line with the surrounding properties, and that's part of the challenge is how do we distinguish or identify this bed and breakfast from surrounding properties that are built of similar brick and style as this property. And the way that we do that is with the sign. The signage is essential for this business to function at this location. And I believe that we've proven each of the 3 elements, and we agree with the city's analysis of the hardship in this case. I'll leave it at that. Thank you to the board and the staffs, including Sue Ann Donovan and Bert Drost, who are always great to work with. And thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Manning. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and close the public portion and go to board deliberation. What kind of thoughts do my colleagues have on this? Anyone want to kick us off?
Mr. Chair, this is Justin Gross.
Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, my initial thought is that, I mean, after hearing from both the applicant and Mr. Graziano, who is in opposition, I mean, and then some comments by Blake is I think it's still a high burden to prove. And the first factor is the language is the operative language is deprived of all beneficial or productive use of subject property. And that I think is such a high burden to prove. And yet I think they fail in that factor. So I am looking at voting no on the variance.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Very clearly stated. Thank you, sir. Other thoughts?
This is Marlis, and really nothing I could add to what Justin just said. I agree with his comments.
Okay. All right. Other thoughts from the board? I'll just go ahead and throw in here too. Everybody on this board thinks through the issues. And as citizens of the city, that's the task we have been given, and everybody does a great job of that. In essence, if everybody complied with the zoning ordinances, there wouldn't need to be a board of adjustment. So any case in front of us wants to do something different than what the regulations allow. That's just a given. Therein, it's our job to see how that fits into the intent of the comprehensive plan of the city, the zoning ordinance, and the requirements therein. And as we peel the layers of the onion here, then we get down to the conditions that apply to exceptions in the ordinance or variances in the ordinance. And yes, the test gets harder and harder, especially when we want to look at a variance. In essence, there's really nothing that they're allowed to do here for the signage, as was stated by city staff. I think what staff was trying to do was recognize the setting of the property, the setting of not only the business there, but a similar business had been occurring there in the past. They did have a sign, granted it was, quote, non-conforming. So I generally try to be a meet in the middle guy, not just because that's my personality, but I like to find a way where it's like consensus building. Everybody gives up a little something, but nobody gives up enough that they feel like they've been cheated or refused on something. I think we have to try to look at those, but still keep our initial test in mind as a board. First and foremost, in this case, I was not familiar with the property. As was stated, I would drive by it, not know it's there. When Jason Van Essen showed us the first picture, I thought the bed and breakfast was that square apartment building. And I'm like, what the heck? What size of building is this thing? And no, it wasn't. But that building and that kind of exit ramp, pit row driveway, if you will, draws somebody to the neighboring building. It doesn't draw them to the property in question. I could see within reason, based on the setting of the property, the alignment of the street. It's only 30 miles an hour, but it is a 4-lane street. It carries a lot of traffic. You got to pay attention there. It would be reasonable that even with wayfinding, once people get near a property, they like to see where they are arriving with some physical recognition. I have watched my friends drive by properties 3 times using their GPS because once they get there, it wasn't clear that they had arrived by any notoriety of how the property had been labeled. But I do think the applicant is a little bit asking to take a mile instead of give an inch here on this. I don't think it's appropriate to have a pole sign here. I'm not an architect, but I have a degree in design. I have plenty of architecture courses, and 2-door English style you could look at many options in masonry to make that small 2-foot base work to complement that existing structure. Doesn't have to look exactly like it, but there's plenty of ways that a monument sign could be an asset for that property while still gaining some wayfinding or a way to show you've arrived. So I believe there's enough reason to support a variance here. I frankly, though, think that the city's 4x6, 24 square feet, in my opinion, that's a little large. I'd say 3x5 and a monument sign would be the most that I would support here. But based on the comments we've already have from the board, or if anybody else wants to comment, if somebody wants to put a motion forward, we can entertain a motion one way or the other and see what sticks. Anybody want to make a motion? It can be for approval of the variance. It can be for staff recommendation for denial, or a combination therein.
I'll move. This is Nathan Blake. I'll move denial of the variance requests.
Okay, so we've got a motion for denial of the variance request. Would there be a second?
I will second that.
Okay, all those in favor, we'll take roll call, but say aye if you're recommending, or if you're voting for denial of the variance.
Cindy Smith,
Aye.
Marlis Jones,
Aye.
Justin Gross,
Aye.
Nathan Blake,
Aye.
Mel Pins.
Nay on that. So
Motion carries 4-1.
yeah, so the motion was for denial. So that motion does carry. I don't know if there's any other options here. If anybody wants to put another motion out, I think they can. If there is no other motion, then the issue's been decided. So I'll just ask, are there any other motions since we do have a denial on the variance? It have to be a new motion for a new consideration. And if there are none, that's fine. I'll just say going once, going twice. Okay, there are no other motions on the table for review of this item. So staff recommendation has been denied. The variance is not granted. Okay, so that concludes item number 10. We have a little business to take care of from last month. Our meeting minutes from July 22nd. If our board members who were here last month have reviewed those, anybody here last month can make a motion for approval or suggest any changes, and then we can vote on that. Would there be a motion for approval?
I'll move to approve. This is Cindy.
There be a second?
This is Marlis. I will second.
Okay. All those in favor, we'll take roll call, say aye for approval.
Nathan Blake,
Aye.
Cindy Smith,
Aye.
Marlis Jones,
Aye.
Justin Gross,
Aye.
Mel Pins.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other business we need to tend to, Mr. Dross?
That would be all today.
Okay. Well, board members and the public, thank everybody and city staff. I thank you for all your time today and participating. Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.
Thank
This
you.
hearing is adjourned.